Last week, we heard how Joshua and Caleb led the Hebrews across the River Jordan and into the Promised Land. But what we didn't tell you was how they got across the river. Let's open the book to the Bible story called Across the River.
Watching and waiting, watching and waiting. God's people waited on the bank of the River Jordan. A long, long last. They were nearly there. At long, long last, they were almost home. For hundreds of years, they had been slaves in Egypt. God had set them free, but because they had not trusted him, they had spent the last 40 years wandering through the wilderness. Now the journey was nearly at an end, for there it was, the land they had been promised, waiting for them there on the other side of the river. God's people watched the waters of the river spilling over its banks. The winter snows had melted and the river was deep. They wondered how they could get across, so they waited for instructions from their leader, Joshua. Watching and waiting, watching and waiting. All of a sudden, one of Joshua's officers arrived, breathless, in a terrible hurry. At last, I have some instructions, he said. Listen, you know our people's precious box, don't you? It's full of holy things. Wait here until the priests who carry it begin to move. Then watch where they go and follow them. But because the box is holy, stay at a distance from it for now. The priest will show you where to go, because you have never been this way before. And one thing, he added, Joshua says you are to get ready. Make yourselves holy too, because tomorrow God is going to do something amazing. The very next morning, the people on the riverbank were ready for whatever would happen. They had got up early to spend time in prayer and had washed themselves very clean and put on their very best clothes, so they too would be special, like the special box. Watching and waiting, watching and waiting. Then they saw the priests lift up the special box full of holy things and carry it down to the River Jordan, just as they had been told. They followed them at a distance, waiting and wondering what was going to happen. The water was still flowing over the river banks, cold and strong and deep. But as soon as the priest's feet touched the water's edge, the river split into two before them, leaving a dry path straight down the middle. The people watched and were amazed. Carrying the special precious box, the priests walked out onto dry land, right in the middle of the river. The people didn't need to watch and wait anymore. They quickly ran down to the edge of the river and stepped onto the dried ground. And there the priest stood, watching and waiting, until all God's people had crossed over. When the last one had reached the other side, they joined the people in their new land and path through the river closed up behind them. After all the watching, after all the waiting, God had done something amazing, and now the people were home.
Joshua had been given some very clear instructions from God. The people had finally learned to trust God, to take care of them, so they did exactly what Joshua told them. No one disobeyed, and everyone was safely on the other side. Close your eyes and think about times when it is really important to do exactly what you were told, like when the fire bell rings or when you need to cross the road. Now I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end. Dear God, thank you for all the people who keep us safe every day. Help us to be sensible and listen to advice on keeping safe. Thank you that you want us to be safe because you love us all. Amen.